Hello, hello. It's Eileen here, and I've got a quick update that I wanted to be sure to share with you before we dive into today's episode. The Resilience Room membership community is going to open its doors for new members Monday, July 28th through Friday, August 1st. If you've been thinking of joining us and want to be sure to be notified when we open, I want to encourage you to join the waitlist. You can do that at go.eileendivine.com/resilience room. That's go.eileendivine.com/resilience room. We only open our doors for new members a few times per year, so if you've been thinking about joining, this is a great time for you to do that. We would love nothing more than to welcome you into our amazing community. So again, you can find all the details and join the waitlist at go.eileendivine.com/resilience room. Okay, on to the episode. There were many years when my daughter was younger where my husband and I would end up bringing two cars to nearly every event we went to so that one of us could leave early if we needed to. That was a direct result of reflection after the event and saying, what happened? What more do we need to do here? Or there were times when we were going to, say, a neighbor's house for a summer barbecue gathering, and we ahead of time would determine who's going to be her person for that entire event. And we would take turns doing this. Hi there, and welcome to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and I am a therapist, parent coach, and educator who supports parents that are raising children, teens, and young adults with brain-based differences and challenging behavioral symptoms. If you are a parent or caregiver of a child who has intense, confusing, relentless, or sometimes even scary behaviors, you are in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Brain First Parenting Podcast, where we explore all the different aspects of what it means to parent a child or a teen with brain-based differences from a Brain First Parenting lens. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and in today's episode, we are going to talk about a really tough part of this parenting experience that I'm guessing you can relate to. I know I certainly can. We're talking about those moments when everything seems to fall apart, where a well-intentioned, well-planned out event spins out of control. And in the midst of the chaos, parents find themselves thinking this about their child or teen: you ruin everything. For parents of kids with brain-based differences and challenging behavioral symptoms, I know how heartbreaking these moments can leave you feeling as a parent. So I want to speak to it and name it and talk about what you might consider in these moments, or maybe after they've passed, to take away some of the sting and to decrease the chances of it happening again in the future. Because that's, of course, always a central focus and always a goal of parenting from this brain first perspective. As parents, we all want our kids to feel loved. We want them to feel accepted and to be happy. So we make plans and we organize events and we try to create joyful experiences for them. But for some kids, especially those with neurobehavioral challenges, the outcome isn't always what we hoped for. In fact, sometimes things go completely sideways. And in those moments, it's really easy to think, man, you really managed to ruin everything. I know I can think of multiple instances over the course of my parenting, more so when my daughter was much younger, when something as simple as a family gathering or a birthday party or just trying to go out to eat as a family ended up feeling not worth it. It left me feeling just so sad and deflated about the fact that there was so much struggle and stress with these things that are supposed to be fun. In those moments, when everything is going off the rails with your child, it's hard to remember the root cause of their struggles because of your own dysregulation over it, your disappointment, your anger, your resentment, which again, lots of self-compassion needed here because you are having that response because you are human. We've all been there. But the work then, our task, is to recognize our own dysregulation and work to soothe ourselves, whatever that means for us, and then find balance or regulation again so that we can shift to a brain-first parenting lens. That's when we're able to see that there's something about those environments or the expectations in that environment that is clashing in some really big ways with who your child is, how their brain works, and where they are with certain cognitive skills. These hard moments are also a cue to us to do some reflection later. Sometimes it has to come much later when we've had a chance to recover from everything that's happened so that we can really look for the patterns. What led to what? What can I learn about my child's window of tolerance from this experience? What do I now see clearly that they were bumping up against in terms of their lagging cognitive skills? How would I do things differently next time based on what happened? Did I push too hard against my child's capacity without realizing it in the moment? Where is there an opportunity to proactively build in more accommodations and support? That really poor outcome you and your child experienced is never as random as it appears on the surface. There are always patterns. It just takes some time, some intentionality, and some practice to see those patterns more clearly. There were many years when my daughter was younger where my husband and I would end up bringing two cars to nearly every event we went to so that one of us could leave early if we needed to. That was a direct result of reflection after the event and saying, what happened? What more do we need to do here? Or there were times when we were going to, say, a neighbor's house for a summer barbecue gathering, and we ahead of time would determine who's going to be her person for that entire event. And we would take turns doing this, meaning one of us was going to actually get to enjoy themselves with some adult conversation, and the other was going to be side by side with her for the evening to support her through it. Yeah, it was hard and it was exhausting, but we knew because of this reflection that we would do afterwards when things wouldn't go well, that that's exactly what she needed. There were also many times where my husband and I would do that reflection afterwards and we'd be kicking ourselves because after some event that would go a little or maybe even a lot sideways, we could see in hindsight that we shouldn't have pushed it, that one of us should have hit the eject button on that event way earlier in the evening when we could see that my daughter's capacity to manage was deteriorating and her behavioral symptoms were escalating. The reason why it's so essential for us to do this type of reflection and recognize this brain behavior connection that we're always talking about, it's always involved. And the reason I'm talking about it today is because that's when we move from you ruin everything to, wow, I can see why this was too much for you. I can see that you reached your limit and you were doing the best you could to manage. It puts us on a different path. If we don't begin to see it for what it is, that our kids are showing us through their behaviors, that something is too much for them, these experiences can start to define how we and how others see our child. We begin to perceive them not for who they truly are, but instead for their challenges and their outbursts and their struggles. Here's the other big piece of this. What your child starts to believe about themselves. When a child consistently hears or feels that weight of that phrase, you ruin everything, they start to internalize it. They begin to believe that they can't do anything right, that they're a problem, that their very presence caused chaos. And over time, that belief becomes a part of their self-perception. This internalization has a serious impact on their well-being. The brain is incredibly powerful, and what we believe about ourselves shapes how we act, how we interact with others, and how we experience the world. And if a child starts to believe, I can't do anything right, I ruin everything, their self-esteem and their confidence suffers. Their relationships grow more strained. Their sense of felt safety is greatly diminished. It really does have a snowball effect. This is one reason why I always advocate talking early, talking often to your kids about their differences, because if they have no idea what it means for them to live with a brain-based difference, they will always believe that they can't do anything right and that they're always the problem. The first step to take in these moments, these really hard moments that we're talking about, and it's harder than it sounds, is instead of reinforcing that idea that they ruin everything with a knee-jerk and usually very understandably emotional response, to instead try to get some space between what just happened, their challenging behavior, and our response so that we can see the situation for what it is. Where is the poor fit? Where are they coming up against their lagging cognitive skills? Maybe they can't handle the noise or the crowds. Maybe they're overstimulated or frustrated or feeling overwhelmed by something no one else seems to notice. Maybe they need more support in the relational skills that are required of them, like going with the flow or negotiating play with the friends, or maybe they need some gentle support and redirection to be able to see how they're coming across to others so they don't continue to take things too far and alienate themselves from those around them. Maybe the situation came up at the end of a long day or a long week and their brain was just too tired to do all of the things that event or that environment required of them. When we can get a little space between what just happened and our knee-jerk reaction, we are better prepared to respond with empathy and say things like, this situation did not go as planned, but it's okay. I could see you were really doing your best. Let's head home and maybe we can try again next time. By separating their behavior from their identity, and seeing their behavior as a reflection of their distress because it was all too much for them and not a reflection of their character, we remind them that they are more than their struggles, that they're worthy of love, of empathy, of understanding, that we know they would have done better if they were able to in that situation. Now, I know that for many of you, you're thinking of times where you have prepared the best you can, and then your child's behavior still starts to spiral, and you see it for what it is, but everyone around you is making you feel like you have the kid who manages to once again ruin everything. That judgment is so harsh, and it's so painful. It really can be devastating as a parent. This is the perfect time, the perfect place for me to remind you that you are not failing as a parent, that your child is fragile and complex, but also tender-hearted and desperately wants to be in connection with others. They do not want to be in trouble all the time and the center of all this negative attention. My hope for you is that in those moments, you can extend the same grace and compassion to yourself that we all wish for our children. I'm so glad that we're in this together. Until next time, take care. Before we say goodbye, I want to be sure that you are aware of all the free resources I've created with you and parents like you in mind. You can access them all in one place at go.eileendivine.com/free resources.